My title today is The Gentle Discipline of Right Effort. It's about right effort or skillful effort, wise effort, uh, right effort. There's a lot of different translations for the Eightfold Path of right or skillful or wise. And with effort, it's about learning to care without straining. And I want to explain a little bit about why right effort needs wisdom. Over the past months, if you've been coming often enough, you've noticed that we've been walking together through the Buddha's Eightfold Path once a month. And it's not a list to be memorized, but it's a lived, unfolding practice. The path begins with right view and then right intention, spoken about grounding us in understanding and the heart's orientation. And then it moves through ethical foundations of harmonious living. Through those next three steps, there's right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That's the ethical three on the Eightfold Path. Also spoken of as skillful speech or wise action, depending on the translation. And these are inviting us to look closely at how our lives affect others and ourselves. The first five steps help us establish clarity and integrity and trust, both inwardly and outwardly. And so today we arrive at right effort, the sixth step on the path, and in many ways, the one that quietly holds everything together. Because insight and intention and ethics don't really sustain themselves automatically. They require energy, but not just any energy. They require effort that is guided by wisdom rather than force, by care rather than pressure. Right effort asks a very human question. How do we keep practicing? How do we keep caring without burning out the heart? When many of us hear the word effort, sometimes, something inside tightens. Our shoulders lift, our jaw clenches, and the inner voice says, try harder. In our culture, effort often means strain or pushing, and proving and forcing. It's the energy of late nights and self-criticism and productivity apps and the quiet fear that we're never quite doing enough. So when the Buddha places right effort in the heart of the Eightfold Path, many of us wonder, is the practice asking me to push myself even more? The answer, luckily, is no. Right effort is not about becoming better at striving. It's about learning how to care wisely. Skillful effort is the energy of the path. It's an energy guided by kindness and clear seeing and balance. When without it, nothing grows. With too much of it, things tear. And without wisdom, effort becomes just another form of suffering. The Buddha places right effort as the sixth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, following right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. And by the time we get to right effort, something important has already happened. We've reflected, we have oriented the heart, and we have begun to live ethically. And so now the question becomes, how do we sustain this path moment by moment in a real human life? Right effort is what keeps the path alive between formal teachings and sittings and everyday moments, between the cushion and the grocery store, between insight and habit, between aspiration and reality. And the Buddha had a simple and actually radical teaching on wise effort. He described right effort very simply in terms of four kinds of wise energy. preventing unwholesome states from arising, abandoning unwholesome states after they've already arisen, cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen, and sustaining wholesome states that are already present. I know that sounds kind of confusing if you haven't heard it, so I'm going to say it again. Preventing unwholesome states from arising, abandoning unwholesome states that have already arisen, cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen, and sustaining wholesome states that are already present. At first glance, this sounds almost obvious. Naturally, we don't want unwholesome thoughts to arise, and we want to cultivate wholesome thoughts. And yet, when we look closely to see how revolutionary it is, the Buddha is asking, he's not asking us to be in conflict with ourselves. He's asking us to learn what leads to suffering and what leads to freedom, and to care accordingly. I'm going to share a few simple synopses of some suttas, the teachings of the Buddha, that can illustrate some of these effort steps. The Samyutta Nikaya is on the four right efforts. Among the Buddha's discourses, the Samyutta Nikaya is really uniquely suited for teaching right effort because it doesn't present the path as an abstract philosophy. Instead, it presents the path as something worked with, returned to, struggled with, misunderstood, and gradually embodied. And the word samyutta means connected or linked. And that's exactly what these teachings do. They link effort to view, effort to mindfulness, effort to liberation, effort to suffering. Right effort in the Samyutta Nikaya is not a heroic solo act. It's a relational process, and it's conditioned by understanding and supported by practice. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha says, monks, there are these four right efforts. What for? Here a monastic generates desire. This is a positive desire. Here a monastic generates desire, endeavors, arouses energy, applies their mind, and strives for the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. Now, I know that sounds kind of backwards. So I'd like to point out that the way it's written in the negative, it transforms into the positive. So, striving for the non-arising of unarisen, unwholesome thoughts. It's striving for the arising of already risen in our mind, wholesome states. But that comes up later because that's the last two of right effort. So what's striking here is not the list, but it's the tone. The Buddha is describing engagement, not violence. The effort is purposeful, but it is not harsh, and it's responsive, not reactive. This effort arises from understanding cause and effect. When we see clearly that certain mental states lead to suffering, doesn't something in us naturally want to care for that? When we have these mental states that arise and lead to suffering, some part of us wants to care about that. And just as we move our hand off of a hot stove because we understand pain, and it's not one of the places that practitioners sort of quietly get lost is that it is not self-development. Sometimes wise effort gets turned into something like self-improvement, fixing ourselves, upgrading ourselves, perfecting ourselves. But the Buddha is not interested in producing a better personality or ego. He was interested in reducing suffering. And in the Samyutta Nikaya, right effort is consistently paired with right view. The Buddha doesn't ask us to generate effort out of moral obligation or spiritual ambition. Effort arises naturally when we see clearly what leads to harm and what leads to freedom. Again and again, the Buddha says some version of when one sees with wisdom, energy is aroused. So this is crucial. Effort is not something that we impose on the mind. It is something that emerges when understanding is present. When we truly see how clinging leads to stress, the heart naturally wants to loosen its grip. When we see how kindness softens suffering, the heart naturally wants to incline in that direction. This reframes effort not as a discipline, but as care. And in the Samyutta Nikaya, treatment of the four right efforts, the Buddha uses language that is active but not violent. He uses words like arouses energy. One applies the mind. One undertakes the effort. What's important is that these efforts are always specific, not vague. The Buddha doesn't say, try harder at everything. He says essentially, be selective. He suggests that some mental states are worth encouraging. Some are worth interrupting. Some mental states are worth sustaining. And some are worth letting fade. And this isn't repression. It's wisdom about conditions. So let me mention right effort as what I'd call non-participation. One of the most radical teachings in the Samyutta Nikaya is that liberation often happens through non-participation. What do you think that means? We don't have to attend to every thought. We don't have to believe every story. We don't have to energize every emotion. We still feel irritated, grief, fear, longing. But right effort says we don't have to keep feeding it with commentary or rehearsal or identity. I'm going to repeat that because I can really relate to this like all the time. We still feel irritation and grief and fear and longing. But right effort says that we don't have to keep feeding it with commentary. We don't always have to have this rehearsal going on or with identity, that we don't have to attend to every thought. We don't have to believe every story. And we don't have to energize every emotion that arises. That restraint is compassionate. It's not cold. It's compassionate. It helps bring balance and peace to the mind. Ajahn Chah once said, if you let go a little, you have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you have a lot of peace. And I remember that over and over. It's one of my favorite sayings to hang on to because it applies to so much of letting go. If we let go a little, we'll have a little peace. If we let go a lot, we'll have a lot of peace. Letting go is not easy. But right effort, paradoxically, often looks like less doing and not more. Less feeding of habits that keep us trapped. One of the quiet teachings that's embedded in wise effort is this: not everything that arises deserves our energy. Some thoughts fade when they're ignored. Some emotions soften when they're not rehearsed. Some habits weaken simply because we stop feeding them. Let me see a little show of hands to see if some of your habits have weakened because you stopped feeding them. Anybody? Have you noticed habits weakening when you don't feed them? Yeah. This is wisdom and discernment at work. And right effort teaches us the courage to ask, does this lead to freedom? or does it lead to more contraction? Another one of the suttas, the Vitakka Santana Sutta, the Buddha offers very practical instructions for working with unskillful thoughts. He doesn't say destroy them. He doesn't say judge them. Instead, he offers skillful means. He suggests replacing an unwholesome thought with a wholesome one. He reflects on consequences, gently turning the attention away and calming mental formations. This is right effort as tenderness. Effort here is not about winning a battle in the mind. It's about learning which thoughts deserve our receptive hospitality and which do not. Joseph Goldstein writes, effort in meditation is not forcing attention, but gently returning again and again. I like to notice the word gently. I often think of right effort as gardening. A garden requires effort, but not yelling at the soil. You pull weeds when needed and you water what you want to grow. You don't scream at the tomato plants for not growing faster. And crucially, you work with the seasons, not against them. Right effort respects timing, conditions, and capacity. The Buddha famously warned against two extremes: indulgence, which he was actually born into as the prince who was completely protected by his family. And it was a life of indulgence. And during the Buddha's time, there were a couple of different paths usually taught. And one was about indulgence, and one was about self-mortification, something that was practiced by ascetics in that time. And that's how the Buddha really came upon the middle path. Right effort walks directly between them. And this is the Buddha's middle path. Too little effort, and the mind drifts in distraction, cynicism, and collapse. And too much effort, and the mind tightens into aversion or control and burnout. Ajahn Sumedho teaches right effort is not about willpower. It's about wisdom. The third teaching I want to mention is the Bojjhanga Sutta, and it talks about balanced energy. In teachings on the 7 factors of awakening, in which right effort is one of them, the Buddha emphasizes balance. When energy is too strong, we cultivate calm. When energy is too weak, we cultivate investigation and effort. Wise effort is not fixed, it is responsive. This is one of the great kindnesses of the Dharma. There is no single correct intensity. There is only what is appropriate now in each moment. So we have to be very present for what's happening now in each moment to determine what's the right effort for the situation, what we want to cultivate, what we want to let go of. Very personal process. Sharon Salzberg reminds us that the healing power of mindfulness lies in our ability to meet what is here without adding anything extra. That's pretty hard. The healing power of mindfulness lies in our ability to meet what is here without adding anything extra. Effort here is the effort not to add blame, not to add fear or self-judgment. Right effort does not only apply to our meditation cushions, it shows up in relationships. Sometimes right effort means pausing before speaking, or not sending an email, or choosing rest instead of reaction. And other times it means having the difficult conversation, staying present when it would be easier to leave, and practicing patience again and again and again. Santusika teaches the practice is not about becoming someone else. It's about meeting this life with integrity. One of the most overlooked aspects of right effort is joy. When effort is aligned, it actually feels nourishing. There's a quiet satisfaction in choosing what leads to freedom, even when it's not easy. The Buddha never separated effort from joy. In fact, joy is one of the signs that effort is right. Over time, something beautiful happens, and effort softens into trust. Effort becomes less about doing and more about allowing. We begin to trust the path. We begin to trust awareness. And we begin to trust that not every problem requires force. Bhikkhu Analayo notes the path unfolds through continuity, not compulsion. The path unfolds through continuity, not compulsion. Right effort ultimately asks us one gentle, powerful question. What am I feeding right now? Because whatever we feed grows. If we feed resentment, it grows. If we feed kindness, it grows. If we feed presence, it grows. Right effort is simply choosing again and again, nourishing what leads to less suffering. Not perfectly, not constantly, but sincerely. And that, the Buddha tells us, is enough. I've mentioned to you Sayadaw U Tejaniya, one of my Burmese teachers. He offers one of the, I think, clearest instructions when he says, the effort to be aware is enough. Just the effort to be aware is enough. Not heroic, not exhausting, just enough. Right effort is not something that we understand primarily through ideas. We understand it by feeling the difference between forcing and caring. So rather than continuing to talk about right effort right now, I'd like us to practice a little sensing of it directly. So I'm going to give a little 5-minute or so guided meditation again. So let's just begin by arriving, allowing the body to settle into whatever posture you're in, seated or standing or lying down. There's no need to make the posture perfect, just allow it to be stable enough and kind enough. Feel the weight of the body. Notice the points of contact. Let the shoulders soften. And let the jaw loosen. And just take 2 or 3 unforced breaths. No need to breathe deeply, just let the breath be honest. Now bring the attention to the quality of energy that you're bringing to this moment. Not the object of attention, but the way that you're paying attention. Is there strain? Is there sleepiness? Is there a subtle pushing or holding? There's no need to fix anything yet. Just notice, how am I trying right now? Just let the breath breathe itself. Let sounds come and go. Let sensations arise and pass. If the mind wanders, notice how you return. Can the return be gentle, unhurried, without commentary? Each return is an act of right effort, not forcing attention back, but choosing again to be present. If a difficult sensation, emotion, or a thought arises, see if you can meet it with curiosity rather than resistance. You're not trying to get rid of it, and you're not feeding it either. This is the middle way of effort. Just notice what happens when you stop adding energy to the struggle. Sense the overall tone of the mind. Not whether it's calm or busy, but whether the effort feels sustainable. Right effort feels like something you could continue. It doesn't exhaust the heart. And when you're ready, if you want to, you can gently open your eyes or keep them closed. It's up to you. This is the effort that the Buddha points to in the Samyutta Nikaya. Not heroic, not dramatic, but deeply transformative. It's the effort to stay aligned with what reduces suffering, moment by moment. One of the reasons that right effort is so easily misunderstood is that many of us are already exhausted. We come to practice burned out from work, family, caregiving, activism, illness, or simply from trying to be a decent human being in a world that keeps asking for more. So when the Buddha says effort, something in us thinks, oh, please don't make me do more. This is where right effort needs to be understood, not as adding energy, but as protecting it. Burnout often carries shame. We tell ourselves, I should be able to handle this. Other people manage. If I were more spiritual, it wouldn't be so hard. But burnout is rarely about weakness. It's usually about misdirected effort. It's not a personal failure. The Buddha spoke often about balance, Too much effort leads to agitation. Too little effort leads to dullness. Right effort is responsive, not fixed. And sometimes it means stepping forward. Sometimes it means stepping back. Sometimes it means resting. The question is never, how hard should I try? The question is, what does wisdom ask right now? What does wisdom ask right now? Right effort asks a very uncomfortable question. Where am I pouring energy that is not actually leading to less suffering? Sometimes we're efforting sincerely, but without wisdom. And we're trying to help and trying to show up, trying to hold things together while quietly overriding our own limits. But the Buddha never praised exhaustion. He praised clarity. Many people come to the Buddhist practice because they care deeply about justice, the earth, community, and liberation. And yet activism is one of the places where right effort is most easily lost. Sometimes we mistake urgency for wisdom, or we mistake anger for clarity. We mistake self-sacrifice for compassion. We care deeply. The stakes are real and urgency takes over. But urgency, unchecked, often leads to constant outrage, rigid views, burnout, and despair. Right effort doesn't mean withdrawing from action. It means refusing to let hatred masquerade as clarity. Effort guided by anger may feel powerful, but it's rarely sustainable. As Thich Nhat Hanh once said, if you are not peaceful, you cannot contribute to peace. That teaching isn't a withdrawal from action, but it's a reorientation of effort. Right effort in activism asks, am I acting from care or from hatred of what's wrong? Is my energy sustainable or is it fueled by constant outrage? Do I know when to rest or only when I collapse? The Buddha understood something we are still learning. A mind on fire cannot see clearly. A mind on fire cannot see clearly. In the Samyutta Nikaya, skillful effort is never described as fighting evil. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's described as abandoning unwholesome states and cultivating wholesome ones. And hatred is always listed among the unwholesome states, even when it feels justified. That doesn't mean we don't oppose harm. It means we watch carefully how we oppose it. How do we oppose harm? Right effort refuses to let the heart be destroyed in the name of righteousness. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about caregiving. Caregiving is one of the clearest mirrors for right effort. When we care for children or elders or partners or those who are ill, effort is unavoidable. There's real work to be done. And yet caregiving often teaches us how easily effort slips into self-erasure. We stop noticing our own fatigue. We stop listening to our own no. We tell ourselves that rest is selfish. But the Buddha never taught effort without nourishment. As Sister Ayakema said, you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot give what you do not have. Right effort in caregiving means recognizing that preserving the caregiver is part of the care. I learned this most clearly during a period of caregiving in my own life. I was caring for someone that I loved deeply, someone who was struggling and vulnerable and needed real sustained support. And at first, my effort felt noble. I showed up, I listened, I problem solved, I stayed available. And slowly, without noticing at first, something shifted. I stopped sleeping well. I stopped checking in with my own body. I stopped asking whether I had the capacity. I told myself, this is what needs to be done, and it's what caring and love looks like. But underneath there was strain. And underneath the strain, there was fear. Fear of failing them. Fear of stepping back. Fear of being seen as insufficient. And one day, after a particularly long stretch of holding everything together, I realized that I was exhausted, not just physically, but ethically. I was no longer acting from clarity. I was acting from compulsion. In that moment, right effort did not mean doing more. It meant stopping. It meant setting a boundary I didn't want to set. It meant letting myself rest, even while things were still unresolved. It meant trusting that care does not require self-erasure. That moment changed how I understood right effort. Sometimes the most skillful effort is asking for help. Sometimes it's setting a boundary. Sometimes it's just sitting down. Now, what about preventing the arising of unwholesome? That sounds pretty hard to do. Preventing the arising of unwholesome. That's the first of those four right efforts, and it's often translated as preventing unwholesome states from arising. Now, in life, this can sound kind of abstract, and it's actually very practical. Preventing unwholesome states might look like not reading one more inflammatory article before bed, or not replaying the same argument for the 10th time inside our heads, or not agreeing to one more responsibility you don't have capacity for. And this is not considered avoidance, it's intelligent restraint. The Buddha understood that conditions matter. And if we keep planting ourselves in soil that drains us, no amount of effort will save us. Then that fourth right effort, sustaining wholesome states, is the one we most often neglect. We notice what's wrong very easily, and we notice what's right much less often. Right effort asks us to protect moments of ease and connection and goodness. This might mean lingering with gratitude, noticing gratitude and staying with it, resting when kindness is present, letting joy be enough without immediately moving on, noticing that joyful moment, appreciating it. Gil Fronsdale teaches that the path is nourished by what we appreciate. The path is nourished by what we appreciate. So in reiterating, the Buddha describes right effort through those four simple orientations: preventing unwholesome states from arising, letting go of unwholesome states that have arisen, cultivating wholesome states that are not yet present, and sustaining wholesome states that are already here. So these are not commandments, or you don't have to micromanage the mind with them. They're an invitation to become intimate with cause and effect. When we see clearly what leads to suffering, something in us naturally wants to stop feeding it. And when we see what leads to ease, the heart naturally inclines in that direction. Over time, right effort matures. It begins as intentional redirection. It becomes steady, becomes continuous, and eventually it softens into trust. We trust that awareness knows how to return. We trust that not everything needs our intervention. We trust that rest can be a part of the path. It's not complacency. It's confidence in the Dharma. Ajahn Amaro reminds us the practice works when we stop interfering with it. And as we live with right effort, in activism, in caregiving, in a tired and tender world, it might help to carry one simple question. Is this effort leading toward freedom or toward more contraction? The answer will change, and that's okay. Right effort isn't about being right, it's about staying responsive. So I'd like to end here and give us time for a little conversation. I'd like to offer dedication for those who are caring for others, for those who are working for justice, for those who are tired, stretched thin, or quietly doing their best. May your effort be guided by wisdom. May your care include yourself. May you know when to act and when to rest. May the effort you offer lead not to exhaustion, but to freedom for yourself and for all beings. So let's take a few moments to just let the words settle down. May we dedicate the merit of our practice to those in pain and sorrow, that all beings may be free from suffering. And if some of this talk resonates with you, keep the information that you receive. And if some of it doesn't, or it seems too complicated, just let it go. Thank you very much for your practice. May it bring you joy.